you're in an isolated area. I grew up in an isolated area, and Oregon is predominantly white, let's face it. So Facebooking and knowing other people and all these groups, we may not get to meet them most of the time, but we know we're out there. And that to me is very encouraging. And to have that dialogue, even if it's an email or even if it's a chat, it really is important to have that connection. Because you're really not alone. You're not.
It's interesting because this Hapa thing is so interesting because there's so many different types of Hapas. I mean, we're mixed Asians. I mean, I know a family where, the sister, brother and sister, but the sister has more of the white looks and the brother looks Asian. It really depends on the genes. But it seems sort of not fair how people judge other people, how people judge us on what we look like, what we are, but we know who we are. I mean, if, whether or not I'm a butt, which I have a lot of different things in me, but we are who we are. I don't consider race as really what I am. I'm just Jamie, but I happen to be this. But, I don't really think a lot about my race. I know it's an issue and stuff like that, but it's very important. I think it's, important to, keep it and, study about it. All three, even though I consider myself more Asian than the white and the Hispanic, but it's important to kind of just learn about the roots and stuff and look into it.
I have to say, I have a problem with the word mutt, and here's why. Because when you talk about race with European Americans, they'll say I'm Heinz 57 and I'm a mutt. And, it's like, who are you? Know your own identity. And, Norwegian or Scandinavian, say that if you're German, if you're English, So I just don't, that sense that, to me, mutt, it's like comparing it to a dog, and it goes back to that idea of purity, of breed, and all that. And that's something I want to get away from. I think it's okay to be whatever. That's the world I live in.
One of the things actually we haven't talked about is within mixed race in terms of power structures. Hapas, if you look at sort of biracial culture, mestizo, Hapa, there's a certain privileging of Asianness, of whiteness, and we don't always talk about that within our own communities at all. We avoid that.
Well,
but
Emily,
it's a touchy issue.
And you sort of got at that notion of sort of diluting race, of things that keep getting more white.
Yeah, I've had, what was your name? Is it Jim? Jamie. Jamie. JC. Okay, I have the opposite issue as JC does. I go anywhere and people think I'm one of them. Right. I mean, I go to the Hispanic festival and people are appalled that I don't speak Spanish. So I think,
This could be a gender thing, though. I mean, seriously, because I have two brothers, and I've seen how we've dated differently, married differently, and where we have been able to go and not be able to go. And it may be something about being a woman that you're allowed to go into places that men aren't always.
Well, I do know my brother had a hard time, and he was beaten up a lot,
Yeah.
and he experienced racism because he looked Chinese. And my experience is completely the opposite. Is
We're
that
gonna have
I want to
sexual
have the
violence
operation
done, right.
to look more Asian. You know what I mean? If I were to, because I feel like that is my identity. And yet, to me, it's this vocal denial wherever I go. Performing in plays, and being the only person of color, and yet you're not. You're not. So it's odd.
Yeah, for men, I think it's a little bit more difficult also because the Asian aesthetic is known for being very sensual, right? And masculinity is not always coupled with that. And so I think for Asian guys, it might be more difficult in mainstream culture. Just overall acceptance, dating. I mean, I'm certainly like friends, that I've had, have said, it's so hard as a guy, to get dates. Those white guys over there have better chance with those Asian girls than I do, and those kind of things. So I think there is a gender difference. I can't speak on behalf of the men though, so.
I'd like to hear from more men.
Yeah.
I would.
Would you like me to speak on behalf of the white people? Are there other questions? Because we're getting down towards the end of the wire here. Yeah.
I'm actually here for Mixed Race Days conference. I presented work at it, and I also do a lot of work with Diasporic Vietnamese Artists Network, and I'm a grad student at UC Berkeley, and I think a lot about the gap between creative work and scholarship. Like, it takes a while, as Laura, what you said, you were learning about things that you found out about 10 years later. So I'm wondering to talk a little bit or ask a question about, the work that's produced by mixed race Asian American artists versus the amount of time it's actually going to take for there to be like a much larger sense of recognition and scholarly importance. Because it takes a while in all fields. It seems to take a while for the academy to catch up with what culture's already aware of. So I'm just sort of interested in asking a more general question about the work that's being done and the anticipated lag time, or even the acceleration of awareness, Laura, with what you're doing with putting together conferences. And there's going to be another one in 2012, I just saw. So, just sort of a general inquiry about that.
Yeah, making artwork is so fun because you can get an idea and you can just go make it. So, but you have to find funding and things like that. But there's a pace you can work at that's exhilarating. And I'm always working. I always have multiple things going on, working on exhibition proposals and art. We use social networking things, Skype, all kinds of things so we can connect very quickly and produce things. And then I also have sort of that academic hat on, and that's a slower world. Oh my gosh, I'm working on this book project. I got the idea for it in 2008. It took all these years to finish the research, and Wei Ming and I just finished doing the second major round of editing on the manuscript, and hopefully it'll be out by 2013 for an exhibition we're working on. Right? It's like, so that your inspiration has to last and have a shelf life. If this thing gets published, right, then it needs to have, what can it have, a 5-year shelf life, hopefully 10 if you're lucky. So what may be so important to you today, what's that going to look like out in time? So that's a little easier to work on historical pieces instead of contemporary. But yeah, that's kind of understanding time. I got tenure in 2007, and that allowed me to stop panicking and realizing I don't have to do everything today. I still haven't totally realized that, but that things as longer term projects over spans of years. It's hard, but yeah, to look at time differently.
I am really frustrated with that aspect. I feel like, especially as an artist, there's the discourse around art is very progressive.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at how women's studies look at the issues of women in culture today, and then women of mixed race or Asian women or different subcategories, it's very different than how feminism is. We're on the third wave of feminism in art history or in art criticism, right? And cultural anthropology has not gotten there yet. So there is a disjuncture between this kind of academic societal studies and what's really going on the ground. And I don't know how, aside from doing panels like this and conferences and how to put forward, but I do find it a little frustrating, even if you have work that's published or you have exhibitions. Well, who does the writing about that? Well, those are the people that are in the academic circles, right? And if they're not on the same page culturally, then it gets really frustrating. So I see it, but I don't know what the answer is to that question.
I wonder do you think that the sort of explosion of MFA programs and interdisciplinary programs is actually helping close up a little bit, where you're having more MFA programs that are actually being taught by practitioners who are involved with, some really pretty heavy discourse in their making?
I think the art making part of that is doing really well and is probably pushing a lot of limits. I think it's the critical analysis of culture that's not keeping up.
Is it the professionalization of knowledge of academia that just doesn't want to move very quickly?
I don't know if it's part of doing research. You have to have so many sources and all these things, and that takes time to
IRB
build up.
approval?
And and then you're getting something published. I don't know if that's what it is, but even like articles, like you'll see, there's certain journals that I read, and you'll see much more progressive critiques of culture in more creative venues than you will in race issue magazines or journals or things like that. And I don't know, maybe we're trying to be nice, we're trying to be correct, or I don't know what it is, but there's some,
Sounds like the academics might need to just get out of the house and go to an art gallery once in a while.
well, that would be wonderful. But
Can I just make a comment on that? So I haven't had a lot of time to think about that, but I think part of it is, and it goes to grant making too. So I'm a nonprofit consultant, and a lot of the groups that I work with are very small and very diverse, and it is very difficult to write a grant in that or structure that tells a story. It just doesn't allow for it. You have to be very, very skilled at articulating in a narrative what you could easily draw. And I think that's the problem, is that the format is asking for factual data in a very dry way. And talking about culture is more of a song or a story or a dance. And I don't know that we'll ever get to the point. I think maybe some people, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could articulate myself in the same way in an academic kind of report that I can in other ways that allows for some creative flexibility. I'm not sure if that's it, but that's what in many ways it feels like to me might be the problem.
We got time, I think, for one more question back at the back.
Hi there, my name is Shar. So I recently read a book by Beverly Tatum called Why Do the Black Students Sit Together in the Cafeteria? I think something along those lines. And she had mentioned that it's for colored students, it's pertinent to have this sense of belongingness among their other colored peers to develop that racial identity. And I think most of you had, and some of the Hapas here may have had an experience in the past, perhaps in today, a sense of, I guess, not being completely belonging in a specific type of ethnic group. And I'm wondering for you guys who seem to have reached that racial identity formation, that highest level of racial identity formation. Well, you seem to embrace it really well. I mean, like, what factored in your life like that pushed you to embrace your being Hapa, I guess? And like, what advice would you give to future families who will be raising Hapa children?
4 questions.
Sorry.
I'm not sure. So what is the specific question again?
Well, I guess
What was that
there's
moment?
2 things, and they're kind of combined.
Right.
But what factors, if not belongingness or like complete belongingness from either cultures that you, or from other ethnic cultures, factored in your embracing being a Hapa, I guess.
Right after 9/11, there was the special registration that was happening, and in Chicago that created a real chilling effect on the South Muslim community. And I remember doing a performance piece, and I'm not a performance artist at all, so going up on stage I was so nervous, but with another writer, and it was for a show called Regarding 9/11. That was what the show was about. And I was working with another person who was Korean and white, and I'd never worked one-on-one with someone else who was Hapa, right? And I'm not a writer, but we sat down to write a comedy skit with each other about being pulled in for an interrogation and people thinking we were one thing, but we're actually another thing. And so it was in that process of, we're supposed to be writing, but then we started just, like telling our whole life stories to each other. It was like, wow, wait, I'm on the wrong track. I don't need to be like, all totally Asian American. This is how I felt at that moment, all Asian American, like, here's somebody else that's like me. But then over the course of telling our stories, we're like, no, we're not like each other. But that was a really cool moment. And then we had this experience of performing it, and then someone saying, like, what are you doing performing this piece at an Asian event? You guys are watered down Asians. And I'm like, wow, we really need to do something. So that was for me that moment where I wasn't going to defect from Asian America as a political identity. That's different than me personally identity. But I realized I want to start working with other performers, artists, writers, and talk about these things more. For me, that was just a really exciting moment. So that's not so much like, that was more like a creative moment where I just want to explore this in my work. And for family advice, I don't want to go there. I don't know. You asked for what advice for raising your...
For raising, I guess, your child, not your child. My fiance is English German, and I'm multi-ethnic as well, and just like how would we raise your
Whatever
kids?
you do, you're going to be wrong and you're going to mess up. Kind of a teenager, that's all I can tell you. Just enjoy. Do whatever feels natural because they'll hate you eventually. So
Just love your kids.
I don't know.
You know,
We can talk later.
one of the things that my mother did with me, which she's a counselor, so she has great insight on child development. But my father moved away when I was 5 and 6 and lived in Washington, D.C., and we were living in Washington, so I did not have him in the house to learn about being a Japanese American as well. She made sure that I went to my grandma's house, my dad's parents' house, all the time. And that I was able, because she knew, when I was growing up, I think I said this earlier, but that people thought I was adopted from Vietnam because I was, born in that era. And we don't look anything like my mother and I. And she knew that the way that they would treat me was that she couldn't raise me outside of the Japanese American community, that I needed to know that. And then, of course, my dad moved back a couple years later. He had a position there, and then, I had that aspect of my life. But I think just making sure, like for me, that was really important, to have a balance and just to know what the different parts of my identity. So when people treated me a certain way, I understood why. It wasn't shocking to me. My FSO was worked with lawyers when there was a case of discrimination in the federal government. He was the one that would go investigate and see if they were really discriminating. So I've always been aware. I don't know that I've never not been aware of race issues. Like it was just there in my face my whole upbringing. But they just gave me an awareness of not only I got to choose what I wanted from each aspect, and then this is how other people might see you, but you are still who you used to be. And I think that's the best thing you can do. And there's mentor programs too that I think kids love people that are in their 20s that they can ask questions to that aren't their parents, right? So that would be something that's really good too.
Do you live in Portland? Okay. Well, I don't know anything about child rearing, so I think that was great advice. I always feel comfortable anywhere else other than Oregon. And I don't know if anybody feels that way. I love Oregon. I love Portland. I love everybody here. But when I go to Hawaii, or when I went to Alaska, when I go to LA, San Francisco, I feel more at home because if I fit in, because there are so many people of mixed race there. And it's just, especially Hawaii, nobody questions that when you say who you are, or they just know. And so I guess my advice is, yes, it's great to be in Portland and, build up a community of people, but also travel and be able to go to different places so you're not just getting sort of the organization, because it's very isolating here. And Portland is the best, and Eugene is second best. Everywhere else, it's very difficult.
I want to give a serious answer though, because you're asked like.
That was serious.
No, for me. I'm saying you are serious. I'm talking about my answer for the parenting thing. I am on the board of a group called Maven in Seattle that serves multiracial people and transracial people in their
in Seattle
families.
too. I didn't know that.
But some of the, I'm just trying to remember, what did we write in text for like Mix 101 for parenting? But I think you were talked about this, but giving your children tools, any parenting things, like I know I can think it in my head, but then in practice it just never works. But prepares kids by giving them tools they are going to run into racist situations. Like how are they going to react? What can they do so that, I don't think my parents are wonderful, but I don't think they knew to anticipate what might happen, and, you know, and things that we may not want to talk about in public. How is your kid going to be able to negotiate that, to give them tools with that? And then, you know, if you can afford to travel, great, but surrounding yourself with other people so that you don't feel like they're all alone, those are a good thing. And I think history is important to give yourself, and give your kids a sense of pride, so books.
And there's a lot of great kids
Music.
books now too, so, you know, that are about
Yeah.
mixed race, which is awesome.
But seriously, they will reject all of that when they become 12. And they'll become something else, and you'll see them
Yeah.
again when they're 21.
That's very true. Anyway, let's give Dmae Roberts and Emily Momohara and Laura Kina a hand. And in case you don't have this tattooed on you at this point, there is an Oregon Nikkei and Apano karaoke night from 7 to 9 p.m.
Of course.
at the Voice Box Karaoke Lounge at 2112 Northwest Hoyt. And I hear Mari is going to sing, isn't that right? So thanks a lot for coming. And if you're not from Portland, are you all from Portland? No, you're
Some
not?
people are driving home, aren't
So enjoy yourself while you're here. You actually got some good weather, and it's a great city. So thanks a lot.
Karaoke night, come on.